Playlisters, we got a real whodunit for you today. It's titled Secretary Gag Reflex and the Curious Case of Vaccines. The victim, of course, is science, and the killer is, sadly, this current administration. This is Political Playlist Happy Hour.
Welcome to Political Playlist.
All right, are we ready, guys?
Happy Hour.
Happy hour.
You fucked that up so bad.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Political Playlist Happy Hour. I'm Michael Kristoff.
I'm Anna Muskie-Goldman.
And we are bringing you into our group chat about politics and the next generation of leaders. And on today's episode, we are discussing how to talk about RFK Jr. and the new childhood vaccine schedules. In other words, all the insanity going on at HHS. But first, Anna, it is primary day. What do we got on the docket? Who's voting today?
It's so interesting because I feel like you think of primaries being earlier, but they do really drag out until the fall. So today
I feel like we've been talking about primaries since like February. And I'm like, who hasn't voted yet?
We have. So today is Wisconsin, South Carolina, Minnesota, Connecticut, and Vermont. And there's obviously a lot of races happening. But before we get into the magic that is RFK Jr. and his worm in his brain. I just wanted to touch on some of the interesting races where young people, as they've been doing all election cycle, are challenging, sort of making noise, playing into some of these larger national narratives. Perhaps the most notable one is for the Wisconsin governor. We have a woman named Francesca Hong. She's 37 years old. She's a state representative and a Democratic socialist, and she is now the front runner in the field to replace retiring Democratic Governor Tony Evers. And she would be the first DSA-aligned governor in a swing state if she wins the general. So this is sort of a similar story to what happened in Michigan. I mean, Abdul al-Sayed did say, like, he was very clear that he is not part of the Democratic Socialist Party, but obviously was endorsed by a lot of people in that direction of the party. But
can I just ask you a question about this Wisconsin primary? Did I see correctly where something like $20 million has been spent in this? And it was like 17 of that was for the other candidate against Francesca. I think there's like a lot of money that's been spent.
There's a lot of money against her, as there was a lot of money against Abdul al-Sayed in Michigan. And again, it kind of just shows what's happening in the leftward momentum of the Democratic Party. And Wisconsin, like Michigan, is a swing state. So will be very interesting to see if she wins this primary, which it seems like she will. What's going to happen in the general election there when she runs against a Republican. So that's something to watch out for.
I think what's like interesting, what that makes me think about, I was listening to somebody get asked this this week, and they were saying, you know, it's so clear the Republicans want to take one line from what some of these DSA candidates say and paint the entire Democratic Party like that. And a Democratic politician, I thought, answered this very good, which was, they're like, listen, we are a Big Ten party, and it's not DSA versus mainstream moderate Democrats. This is reflecting what the voters are feeling and thinking and wanting in this moment in these areas. And I do think that this is maybe a challenge for them as far as corralling, you know, their large caucus. But I don't know. Do you feel like the party is just tacking far left?
No, I just think it's a sign of the times. I think that Democrats have always been a big tent party. That's what has made messaging so difficult for the party. But my viewpoint is, I don't agree personally with some of the positions of Democratic Socialist candidates. But my whole theory is, like, if there are people suddenly excited about voting and like voting for candidates who by and large are standing up for like what the party has always fought for when it comes to issues like healthcare or tax reform or things like that, I just think that it's kind of stupid to be counting those people out. And I think it speaks to the reason that we've always wanted to cover young people, which is, we're not saying that young people are always the most progressive, obviously, but that to have new ideas and have candidates that people are excited about, like, I think that on the Democratic side, that's what Democrats have been missing. So, like, sorry to all the moderates and establishment people who feel like they're being attacked from the left, but I think it's more wise to try to build a coalition rather than say that these people are dangerous or whatever. And I think Haley Stevens was a perfect example of that. She got up on stage with him the next day and said, I endorse you. And, you know, I'm sure that she's not thrilled with how things played out, but she's a smart politician. And I also think she's a smart person and sees the necessity of it. So, anyway, just to move on through a couple more races today, in Wisconsin's 3rd district in the Democratic primary, there's a woman named Rebecca Cook who is running. She's 38 years old. She is a dairy farm-raised small business owner, and this is her 3rd time trying to win this swing seat. So it's currently represented by Republican Representative Derek Van Orden, and this district is like truly a purple toss-up district. And she is the favorite in the Democratic primary, and she's actually polling very competitively against the Republicans. So again, another race in Wisconsin to watch out for, because as we know, there are less and less of these true swing districts around the country that will decide control of the House, and this is one of them. So her name is Rebecca Cook, and you should follow her race today. The 3rd race I wanted to mention is the special election for the South Carolina Senate Republican nomination. Since Lindsey Graham passed away, we know that now his sister, Darlene, is running. And the other person who has always sort of been the front runner in this race until Darlene got in there was Russell Fry, who is a Republican representative that we've talked about on Political Playlist. He's 41 years old, very conservative. When I was researching him, what came up, endorsed by Representative Nancy Mace. And I'm like, is that the endorsement that you want these days?
I don't know that we,
But anyway, so he's one of the top contenders against Darlene Graham, and then also Ralph Norman. And this is a very crowded field, and the race is kind of a scramble since Lindsey Graham passed away so suddenly.
And Nancy Mace is not entering that race, correct?
No. So she self-nominated herself. Like she basically when
she's
Lindsey
like, well,
Graham
I think I could be good.
Exactly. Because as we know, she tried to run for governor and did not succeed. And so she but then I think she's tried to position herself as sort of like a kingmaker in South Carolina politics. So she endorsed Russell Fry. So that whole narrative is like pretty crazy. But anyway, if no one clears 50% in this primary, then there will be a runoff on August 25th, which is literally in like 12 days. So the South Carolina Republican Senate nomination process is going to be a shit show. And then the last one that I wanted to mention, because it's close to both of us, is that Ned Lamont, the governor of Connecticut, has a semi-serious primary challenger for the first time in a long time. And I was reading something, and I'm sure you know this because...
So did you... I forget if you just said that. He's the governor of Connecticut?
Correct. He's the governor of Connecticut. Yeah. Did I say that?
Well, no, I feel like maybe you didn't. And just
maybe
so
I
for
didn't.
a listener,
sorry. Yeah. Michael and I are both from Connecticut.
Ed Lamont. And he's running for his 3rd term. We don't have term limits in Connecticut.
Running for his 3rd term. But what's interesting, and maybe you knew this, I didn't know this, is that so the way that Ned Lamont began his sort of more notable part of his political career is that he challenged Senator Joe Lieberman in 2006 after Joe Lieberman had been the vice presidential candidate, and felt that Joe Lieberman, who was very moderate to the point of being almost like a libertarian in a way, that Ned Lamont felt that Joe Lieberman was not liberal enough. So he actually was the left insurgent candidate in 2006, and he lost that election, but then went on to become governor. And now, interestingly, he's being challenged from the left by State Representative Josh Elliott, who's 41 years old, who argues that Lamont hasn't done enough to fight Trump or sort of fight for current liberal democratic values. And Connecticut, by and large, is a very blue state. So it's interesting to note there. And at first, Lamont wasn't really paying attention to Elliott's challenge, but then Elliott started to gain some steam. So now there's been
Right.
attack ads against him and stuff like that. So just a little shout out to our home state of Connecticut.
Yeah, cool. Well, should we discuss how to talk about HHS and that big painful sigh that you just gave?
God.
We're going to get to the RFK Jr. interview that he did with Dana Bash last week, because I think it plays into this. But the breaking news that happened yesterday, which was, I guess, technically off the schedule, was a little bit of a surprise, where Trump, with RFK Jr. standing behind him, signed an executive order in the Oval Office yesterday where, for the third time in less than a year, he has rolled back vaccine mandates and schedule for childhood vaccines. So basically, this now reduces the recommended immunization of 11 diseases down from 17, which is the current recommendation for from the CDC. The 11 vaccines that is now mandating are measles, mumps, rubella. This is commonly referred to as the MMR. They're given together as 3. You have diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, polio, pneumococcal, HPV, chickenpox. No longer recommended are hepatitis A, hepatitis B, meningococcal,
Keep trying.
meningococcal vaccines, annual flu vaccine, and COVID are no longer recommended. Furthermore, the MMR shot is being separated into 3 doses. So instead of giving them together, it's going to be given 3 separate doctor visits. I think also notable in this is that the states are being encouraged to re-examine their position on vaccine mandates with respect to schools, and they're also this administration is encouraging states to challenge these to sort of further reduce them.
What a shit show.
It is unclear what the legal power of this order is. Vaccine recommendations in the United States are made by a committee of experts, and then they are adopted by the agency. It is unclear if the president has the authority to do this, so I'm sure we're going to see legal challenges play out. Before we dive into all this, I feel like a lot of people listening, know of RFK Jr. as kind of this kooky guy. He's a Kennedy, but like they don't really know fully like what is his whole like vaccine crusade and like what are the elements of play. So I just wanted to kind of level set for us as we kind of go into this. So he has spent years pursuing, what is a deeply personal anti-vaccine agenda. He has repeatedly amplified debunked claims about vaccine safety, about how vaccines are tied with autism, and over vaccination causes autism. He has questioned childhood immunization writ large. He has cited false science, and so I don't think it's enough to paint him as just a skeptic. I mean, he is
He's the most famous vaccine skeptic in the world.
Right. He's anti-vax, and what was clear from day one is that he's using the machinery of the federal government and of HHS to really put in place these ideas that are not backed by science. And I think 2 notable quotes here. The first is immediately following this, Senator Bill Cassidy, who's a Republican, who was ultimately the vote that confirmed Kennedy, which Bill Cassidy has now come to deeply regret. immediately broke with the administration saying, I am a doctor. This executive order is wrong. The president does not have the expertise to make these changes. Of course, members in the scientific and doctor community have expressed similar things, saying that there are no credible links to early childhood vaccines and autism. But I think, like, my first question to you, Anna, is why do we think so many people, and I guess on the Republican side of things, I'm looking at Bill Cassidy and I'm looking at others, why do we think they're letting this happen?
Well, I think that there's twofold. I think for someone like Bill Cassidy, there was at least the understanding that there's an agenda on the Republican. I mean, you kind of talked about this, I think, in the one of last week's episodes. Like, there seemed to be this tacit understanding of, like, there are Republican policies that they want to make sure go in place that are completely unrelated to HHS and health.
Yep.
And in order to make those things happen, holding up a nomination for HHS secretary was going to be detrimental to that. So I think that's one side of things. And then I think you look at some of the more sensible or even nonsensible Republican politicians who I don't think really have strong feelings about this at all. I mean, like someone like Mike Johnson, I'm like, I don't think Mike Johnson has ever had qualms with the vaccine schedule in the United States.
Right.
But see the Maha wing of the Trump, co-voting coalition as very important. And so are willing to just go along with this because they need those votes. And so that's, I think, the other faction of this that is, I think deeply troubling, because I think that when you look at like the Maha movement, it's very complex, and there's a lot of it that is totally legitimate, which is like, yeah, we shouldn't be giving blanket, runway to chemical companies that are spraying food in the United States. Like the food dye conversation, I think, is a little bit more complicated. Sure, food dye is bad. Is it the worst thing we're putting in our body? Probably not. But like, great, you want to clean up the food, fine. But then when you get into this vaccine part of it, it becomes much more controversial, I think. And so I just feel like there's a lot of political tiptoeing, and, someone like Bill Cassidy will have to live with his decision to vote for RFK. And unfortunately, that's going to have to be enough of a punishment for him.
I feel
and
like
not being reelected, I guess.
I feel like every great conspiracy starts with a kernel of truth.
Yeah, of
and
course.
then builds the sort of the shell of falsehoods and lies
And I
and
would say
deception around that.
I would say that with the Maha movement, it's more than a kernel of truth. Like, it is a true problem that in the United States, large corporate money and power has created, I think, specifically in farming, an ecosystem that is
We
not
saw that with the
healthy.
lettuce.
We saw it with the lettuce.
Right.
But like, to that point, the reason that wasn't caught is because there have been these dramatic cuts at HHS that track things like that. And so that's the whole other part of the problem. But I just think that to the kernel of a truth, like, I will give Maha activists more credit than that, which is that there are a lot of concerns that are completely 100% valid. And RFK was a person who was able to look at those concerns and then, unfortunately, in my point of view, extend it into something like actual scientific medicine that is going to have really detrimental effects, mostly on children, which is what's so difficult about all of this.
Well, I was chatting with my mom, and she was reminding me that when I was getting vaccinated as a kid, one of the things that with the MMR cluster of shots, Trump was in the Oval Office yesterday while he was signing this, and he was saying how, they are giving kids I think he said it was like a soda bottle's worth of vaccine, and that actually isn't the case. The amount of vaccine liquid they're putting in a child is The exact amount is 1/10 of a teaspoon. So not a soda bottle worth of liquid.
Oh God.
And he is using this. He's using the talking points of RFK, saying, "Well, these vaccines cause autism, and blah 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 blah." With the MMR shot, there have been instances where that can cause seizures. And this actually happened to me as a kid when I got the DT P cluster. So that diphtheria. So apparently
That's tetanus, isn't it?
pertussis. Yeah, the pertussis vaccine caused me to have a seizure that I imagine is very scary as a parent. And you don't I think I was taken to the hospital and I was okay. And I don't have autism. And well, and so I think that my understanding is that then the conversation between my parents and the doctors was just that. It was a conversation, and it was, okay, let's follow what is the medical guidance here. I still continued to get vaccines. I think maybe because I had a bad reaction to that, I then didn't get, one of those, whether it was
sure. Or weighted or whatever.
Or weighted, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was okay, well, right. When those things happen, you then alter your course. And so, this mandate on this executive order where it's saying, okay, we're going to break up the MMR. What that means is that, okay, you're first going to give a measles shot. By the way, we are seeing record high measles outbreaks all over the country, and particularly in areas that have been following this MAHA and RFK ideology and guidance. But what that means is that then you've got mumps and rubella that you haven't been vaccinated for. And so then what's going to happen? Well, then you're going to have outbreaks of those because you haven't gotten those yet.
Because you're delaying. Yeah.
Right. And I think what's so interesting about this and kind of sad is that, just from the practical elements, I think our healthcare system from a policy standpoint is so broken. But Anna, you know how difficult it is to go to the doctors once.
Yes, exactly.
Now you have to
and
schedule,
expensive.
And expensive. Now you have to schedule 3 appointments.
So basically, just to kind of
right.
Talk about this in practical matters. Even if you have great insurance, you're going to have probably a copay every time you go to the doctor. You have to maybe drive there or take transportation to get there, which costs money. You go a bunch of times in the beginning months and years of having a kid, which is when all of this is being applied. And that all adds up in a time when people are already having economic hardship. And the thing that I would just synthesize with all of this is it's what they're saying in this new mandate or whatever is this is now the federal guideline from HHS.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is I think to your point, it's not coercing doctors into doing anything or coercing families into doing anything. But most people turn to guidelines to make decisions about their health and their family. And so if the guidelines are suddenly very opaque and you have disagreement between the government and groups like the American Medical Association and things like an American Academy of Pediatrics, then suddenly you're looking at all these different things saying, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know what the right thing to do is. I don't know how many times I should be going to the doctor. Should I be grouping the MMR together? Should I be separating them? And so you're creating this web of confusion, which ultimately leads to unhealthier outcomes. And that is what I think is so problematic about this is like so many of these other issues that are plaguing people right now, you're confusing the public and creating frankly, a new world of chaos for overworked, tired, underpaid American parents. And that is, I think, where when they say we're releasing these new guidelines or this new vaccine schedule recommendation or whatever, That's the result of it. It's not so much like, oh, this is going to be some legal challenge or whatever. That's all going to happen. But the practical implication of this is that people are going to be fucking confused. And that's not good when it comes to health.
Let's talk about this misinformation, because during this Oval Office signing yesterday, apparently Stephen Miller, the top aide to the president, chimed in during this and when they were talking about childhood vaccine schedules. He said, quote, "Nobody has studied it. Nobody's looked into it. Nobody's thought about it." So clearly that is just
LOL.
Like, that's laugh out loud fucking hilarious, but also bonkers, right? Because this is one of the most powerful people in government, and who really has the ear of the president, who I think, quite frankly, doesn't give a fuck about
Donald Trump
childhood
vaccines. He doesn't
vaccines.
care. He's never been to a child's doctor's appointment in his life.
No. That was Melania's purview. And so, then the two other wives. Right. And so, this was directly contradicted by the American Academy of Pediatrics, as well as the CDC Advisory Committee, which has released numerous studies on this, numerous guidances on this. And I think this takes us to last week's interview with the incomparable Dana Bash, who had RFK Jr. on her show.
This interview made me so uncomfortable.
And for anybody who missed it, it was on CNN's State of the Union. And it effectively, began with Dana asking him very valid questions, given that she is a journalist and he is the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And it basically devolved into a shouting match, but not on her part, on his part. And he starts going after and all relitigating COVID. This, of course, was on the heels of the Fauci congressional testimony, or lack thereof. RFK Jr. starts attacking journalists who are questioning him and calling Dana Bash and CNN like they're committing malpractice and frightening Americans. I mean, the whole thing was crazy. But ultimately, after recycling these debunked claims that he continues to do, he then hilariously made the admission and acknowledged that the MMR vaccine is effective and explicitly told parents to get their kids vaccinated against measles.
Well, the other thing that he said about measles that I thought was so strange is when she was talking about the measles outbreaks, his defense was not, oh, it's because people are vaccine hesitant in my image. He said that it was because those are all COVID babies who didn't get the MMR vaccine during COVID, and now they're all getting measles. And my thought is like, wait, I do recall that doctors' offices were still open. People were still bringing their kids in for their doctor's appointments, presumably following the vaccine recommendations, which included MMR at the time. And so that was a really weird, to your point, like validating the vaccine works if his point was remotely true, but also just an insane scape. The whole interview was essentially this using COVID as the scapegoat for all of this, which I think what Dana's point was, okay, we can relitigate COVID all you want, but what is the plan for next time? And I think that was the thing that's so scary about this when you have someone like RFK in charge of the department, is that there clearly is no plan, because to your point earlier about the Cyclospora lettuce, they've cut all of the funding and people and departments that are supposed to be protecting us and planning for the next pandemic, the next small outbreak like the Cyclospora thing. Like, those are all groups of people, groups of scientists, money going into research that is supposed to be this barrier so that we can prepare. And she kept asking about that preparation, and he just kept talking about what went wrong during COVID. And as an American citizen, we can all agree COVID was really complicated. We were wiping our groceries. That was not necessary. But like, to relitigate all of that and just say that it was so bad is not helpful for those of us who are looking into the future saying, okay, but what about next time?
So I'm so glad you brought this up, because I think that was also the key takeaway for me. is that as she kept asking, what is the plan for the next thing? He wasn't able to answer that because there is no plan. And with regard to these cuts, so the federal health workforce has been gutted. HHS announced the elimination of roughly 10,000 jobs on top of 10,000 voluntary departures. So the department, since he has taken over, the department has shrunk from about 82,000 employees to 62,000 employees. CDC, NIH, massive cuts at NIH, and FDA have all lost experienced scientists and researchers and everything. He has thrown the CDC leadership into crisis, fired the former director, Susan Monarez. He has not really figured out who the new, he's only considering a new director, but I don't think that person has been confirmed or appointed yet. He has dismantled all of these.
So sorry, let me interrupt you because that's not true. So
Oh.
the Senate did vote recently, as of 6 days ago, to confirm Dr. Erica Schwartz as the new director of the CDC. And so she is the first permanent leader.
She has been confirmed now?
She has been confirmed.
Okay.
She's notably the first Black person to lead the CDC. She's the first permanent leader for the agency in a year. She's the former U.S. deputy surgeon. The U.S. Deputy Surgeon General in the first Trump administration, actually trickled into the Biden administration, and the former Chief Medical Officer for the U.S. Coast Guard. So she is qualified. She got her medical degree from Brown. She got a law degree from the University of Maryland, but she has taken some positions more aligned with RFK Jr. than I think most people on the left or in the medical community would like. So she's certainly not the ideal candidate for all people, but I think given how extreme RFK is, she at least feels like she has a head on her shoulders.
Yeah.
Anyway, continue.
Well, and then other things, he's undermined the research and studying of vaccines and development programs, and ultimately he is just implementing all of these policies. And I think going back to our original sort of discussion question, it just doesn't seem like there are any more guardrails on this. And I'm so worried about the state of our health, the state of our preparedness for whatever the next outbreak is. We are certainly not immune to that, as we've seen time and again. And it's very alarming to me that somebody like him has just been left in charge of this. And I think the scariest thing for me that I want to just mention here with regard to RFK is his arguing style is one of those that we've seen from a lot of, very far spectrum, no pun intended, people who have these fringe views. And their debating tactic is as cynical as it gets. They flood the conversation with these sweeping claims. They rarely identify actual studies to support it. And then they turn the onus onto the person they're talking to. And they say, well, you read the research. Go read the research. Go look at the studies.
My favorite quote from the interview with Dana Bash was that at one point he said, you probably don't understand this because you're not a scientist. And she said, right. You're not either.
Neither are you, buddy. Yeah. It was great. And this is, so they shift the burden of proof away from them and they put it onto you. And I think that, what I would encourage anybody, on any matter of importance to their health is to listen to your doctors and just follow the science and the research. Don't fall victim to this bogus misinformation and these unproven, unsupported claims, however tantalizing or convincing they might seem on paper. I really, it's so scary. Many of my extended family are in the medical community and they all say the same thing. They say, listen, science and data is science and data. Follow it. It's not always right. Some data is more supportive than others, but the medical community lives off of data, and these vaccines and science has really made miraculous life-saving progress in our world.
And correlation is not causation. Remember that from like middle school science class, guys.
Correlation is not causation. Wow.
I'm smart.
Yeah. Well, on that note, cheers.
Cheers. Thank you guys for listening. If you like what you hear at Political Playlist, please make sure you're subscribed, following, whatever you got to do to tune in with us twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and leave us a review. Leave us some stars. Follow us on social media, and we'll see you soon.